The call that started everything. The night was quiet in Los Angeles, but Keanu Reeves couldn't sleep. The city lights flickered outside his window, casting long, soft shadows on the floor. He sat alone with a cup of cold coffee, thinking about a time that felt both near and distant. A time when laughter came easily, when life felt lighter, and when a woman named Sandra Bullock changed the way he saw friendship forever. The silence was broken by the soft vibration of his phone. An unknown number flashed on the screen. He hesitated before answering. "Hello?" His voice was calm but weary. "Keanu, it's me, that voice. Gentle, familiar, layered with years of memories." Sandra. For a moment, he didn't speak. The sound of her voice carried him back to their first film set, when they were both young, nervous, and full of dreams. He remembered how she used to laugh between takes, her energy making even the longest days brighter. But this call wasn't light. Her tone was soft, trembling. "I'm sorry to call so late," she said. "I didn't know who else to reach." He sat straighter. "What's wrong?" There was a long pause, the kind that says more than words ever could. "It's about something I should have told you a long time ago," she said quietly, something that never got finished. His heart tightened. For years there had been something unspoken between them, a story they never closed. Not love, not exactly, something deeper. Respect, affection, understanding, the kind that time could never erase. "Where are you?" he asked. "Vancouver," she replied, "shooting a small project. I'll be done in 2 days. Can we meet?" He looked around his apartment, the quiet walls, the old piano, the unfinished book beside him. He knew he couldn't say no. "Yes," he said softly, "I'll be there." 2 days later, a light drizzle covered the city of Vancouver. Keanu stepped out of the airport wearing a simple black jacket and carrying only one small bag. He didn't want attention, and he never traveled with an entourage. His eyes scanned the crowd, and then he saw her. Sandra, standing near a coffee stand, hair tied loosely, wearing a beige coat and a tired smile. For a second, time stopped. They hadn't seen each other in years, but it felt as if no time had passed at all. She looked at him and laughed softly, just as she used to. "You look exactly the same," she said. "So do you," he replied, though he knew it wasn't true. Both of them had changed, in the quiet ways that life changes people who've seen joy and heartbreak alike. They sat inside a small cafe away from the noise. The waiter recognized them but said nothing. Keanu liked that kind of silence, the kind filled with respect. "Why did you really call me, Sandra?" he asked finally. She took a deep breath. "Do you remember the letter?" He frowned. "What letter?" "The one I left on the set of the lake house, the day we wrapped filming. I wrote something for you, but I never gave it." He stared at her. The lake house had been one of their most emotional films. Two people connected through time, waiting for the right moment to meet. Behind the scenes, both had felt the story was strangely personal. "You never gave me any letter," he said. She looked down. "I know. Someone took it before I could." He felt something shift inside him, a small buried ache he didn't know was still there. "What was in it?" She hesitated, eyes glistening. "I wanted to tell you that you were right." "Right about what?" "About kindness," she said softly. "You once told me that fame fades, but how we treat people stays forever. I didn't understand it back then, but I do now." Her voice broke slightly. Keanu leaned forward, his tone gentle. "What happened, Sandra?" She wiped her eyes. "Someone from that set, a young assistant, came to find me last week. She told me something that changed everything. Something about you. About what you did for her." Keanu looked confused. "What do you mean?" Sandra reached into her purse and placed a small folded note on the table. It was old, the edges yellowed, the ink slightly faded. "She said this was yours," Sandra whispered. "You wrote it the night her father passed away." Keanu's face softened with surprise. He had a faint memory, a girl crying on set, alone in a corner. He had written a short note for her, telling her not to give up, that life still had beauty waiting for her. He didn't think she'd kept it. "She said that note stopped her from ending her life," Sandra said, "and that she's now a filmmaker." Because of you. Keanu looked away, blinking back tears. I didn't do anything special, he said quietly. I just wrote a few words. Those words saved someone, Sandra replied. And she said you never wanted credit. The cafe went quiet again. Rain tapped softly on the window, as if marking the rhythm of their silence. That's why I called, Sandra said after a moment. Because I realized we both left something unfinished. Not a film, not a friendship, but the truth. People see what's on screen, but they don't know what's behind it. And I think maybe it's time they did. Keanu nodded slowly. Maybe, he said. But some truths hurt. Some heal, she whispered. They sat for a long time, neither rushing to leave. Outside, the rain grew heavier, and yet something inside both of them felt lighter, like the start of a story they were finally brave enough to finish. When they stepped out of the cafe, Sandra smiled faintly. Do you ever think about what would have happened if life had gone differently? Keanu smiled back, his voice calm but full of meaning. Maybe we're still finding out. As they walked through the misty street, unaware of the cameras watching from afar, one small truth lingered between them. That sometimes, unfinished stories are just waiting for the right moment to be told. The letter that disappeared the next morning, Sandra sat by her hotel window staring at the clouds above Vancouver's skyline. Her coffee had gone cold, but she didn't care. The meeting with Keanu last night had brought back memories she had spent years trying to lock away. Laughter on set, long conversations between takes, and the quiet way he always treated everyone, from producers to lighting crew, with the same calm respect. She remembered the letter, the one she wrote but never gave him. It had been her way of saying thank you, not for fame, not for the movies, but for how he made her believe that kindness could still exist in a world that often forgot it. And now that letter was gone. Or maybe it had never really left her life. There was a knock on the door. Sandra turned. It was her assistant, Lucy, holding a small brown envelope. Someone left this at the front desk for you, Lucy said. Sandra frowned. The envelope had no name, only 2 words written in neat handwriting. Unfinished story. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside was a single folded page. The paper was old, creased, but the words were still clear. Dear S, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I just wanted to say that you've changed the way I see kindness. You make me believe that stories can heal people, not just entertain them. Maybe that's why we met. Not for a movie, but for something bigger. K. Her breath caught. It was Keanu's handwriting. But the letter wasn't one she had ever received. It must have been the other side of her unfinished note, the reply that never reached her. For a moment, she sat frozen. Then slowly she smiled. Fate had a strange way of returning what was lost. Across the city, Keanu walked along a quiet street near the water. He liked Vancouver's stillness. No one followed him here, no flashing cameras, no reporters. He stopped by a small bookstore tucked between 2 cafes. It was the kind of place that smelled of old paper and gentle silence. Inside, a young woman looked up from the counter. Her face lit up when she saw him. You probably don't remember me, she said shyly. He smiled softly. I'm sorry, you'll have to help me. My name's Elena, she said. I used to be a production assistant on the lake house. Keanu's eyes widened slightly. You were the one who got your note, she said, finishing his sentence. I still have it. He felt a quiet warmth rise in his chest. I'm glad it helped you, he said. She nodded, her eyes glistening. It did more than help. It changed my life. I started writing because of you, and I found something you might want to see. From under the counter, she pulled out a small notebook. Its cover was worn, corners bent, pages filled with faded ink. She handed it to him carefully as if it carried a heartbeat. Where did you get this? Keanu asked, his voice soft but tense. It was left behind on set after the last day of shooting, Elena said. Nobody claimed it. I kept it because it felt special. He opened it slowly. The first page stopped him cold. It was Sandra's handwriting. Dear Keanu, thank you for being kind in a world that can be cruel. I've seen how you listen when others don't. How you stay humble even when the world puts you on a stage. I think maybe one day people will realize that your greatest role isn't on screen. It's who you are off it. The words blurred as his eyes watered. He closed the notebook gently. This was the letter, he whispered. The one she never gave me. Elena nodded quietly. I figured it was meant for you. I just didn't know how to get it back to you until now. Keanu stood there for a long time, holding the notebook. Memories came flooding back. The laughter, the quiet glances, the easy friendship that never needed explanation. And the pain of timing, always a step too late, always a letter unsent. Finally, he looked at Elena and said softly, Thank you for keeping it safe. She smiled. Some stories wait until the world is ready for them. That evening, Keanu called Sandra. His voice was low, steady. I found it, he said. Found what? She asked. Your letter. There was silence on the line. Then he heard her breathe in sharply. How? Someone kept it. Someone who believed it mattered. She didn't speak for a moment, and when she did, her voice trembled. I never thought it would find you. I thought it was gone forever. Some things don't disappear, he said quietly. They just wait for the right moment. She let out a small laugh, half broken, half relieved. So what now? I don't know, he replied. Maybe we read it together. The next day, they met at a quiet park near the edge of the city. The rain had stopped, and the air smelled of pine and damp grass. They sat on a wooden bench overlooking the lake. Fitting, Sandra thought, almost poetic. Keanu took out the notebook and opened to the first page. Do you want to read it? He asked. She shook her head. You should. He began to read aloud, his voice calm, filled with emotion that came from years of silence. With every word, Sandra's eyes glistened. By the time he finished, the notebook trembled slightly in his hands. I wrote that because I thought I'd never see you again, she said softly. I didn't know how to say it in person. You just did, he replied, closing the notebook gently. They sat in silence for a while, watching the water ripple under the gray sky. Funny, isn't it? Sandra said after a moment. How the movie was about time keeping two people apart. And here we are, years later, still waiting for letters to find us. Keanu smiled faintly. Maybe time isn't our enemy. Maybe it's just our storyteller. A light wind brushed past them. Sandra turned to look at him, and for the first time in years, she saw the same calm kindness that had drawn her to him in the first place. But there was also something else. A quiet sadness, like a man who had seen too much loss and still chose to be gentle. You've changed, Keanu, she said softly. He looked out at the lake. We all do, but I still believe what I told you back then. Kindness doesn't need an audience. And that's why people love you, she said. Because you never act kind. You simply are, he didn't reply. Instead, he took the notebook and handed it to her. Keep it, he said. It's part of your story, she smiled sadly. And yours. As the sky began to clear, a faint sunlight broke through the clouds, reflecting on the water. Neither of them spoke again. But in that quiet moment, they both knew something had shifted. Not a reunion, not regret, but a peace that came from finishing what once felt incomplete. The message that changed everything, the next morning, Sandra woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing on the nightstand. Her mind was still heavy from the emotions of the previous day. The lake, the letter, the silence that said more than words ever could. She had barely slept, but for the first time in years, she felt calm. It was as if an invisible weight had finally lifted from her heart. She reached for her phone, expecting a call from her agent or studio. Instead, she saw a message from an unknown number. If you want to know the real reason that letter never reached him, meet me today at the old film studio, stage 5, at noon. No name, no explanation. Sandra frowned. She read the message again, her pulse quickening. It felt strange, almost like a scene from a movie. She typed a reply. Who is this? But the message failed to deliver. For a moment, she thought about ignoring it. But curiosity, mixed with something deeper, a sense of unfinished truth, pulled her in. By noon, clouds hung low over Vancouver. Sandra arrived at the studio where their old film had been shot years ago. The place was quiet, almost abandoned. Faded posters still hung on the walls. The air smelled of dust and memories. She walked through the hallway and stopped at stage 5. The heavy metal door creaked as she pushed it open. Inside, the space was dimly lit. Old props were scattered around, a rusted bicycle, a broken window frame, a stack of unused film reels, and near the back a figure stood with their back to her. "Hello?" she called softly. The person turned. It was Elena, the young woman who had given Keanu the notebook. "Elena?" Sandra's voice echoed slightly. "You sent the message?" Elena nodded. Her face looked tense, uncertain. "I had to. There's something I didn't tell you yesterday." Sandra's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" Elena took a deep breath. "The letter wasn't just lost. It was taken." "Taken?" "By someone from the production team," Elena said quietly. "Back then, I was just an assistant, but I remember seeing the coordinator, Mark Henderson, reading your letter before it disappeared. I thought maybe you'd given it to him to deliver, but later I found out he sold celebrity items, handwritten notes, autographs, anything that could make money." "I think he sold yours too." Sandra felt her heart sink. The thought that something so personal had been treated like a collectible felt painful. "How did it end up with you then?" she asked. Elena hesitated. "A few years ago, I found the notebook in a vintage store in New York. It had both your letter and Keanu's note inside. I bought it back before anyone could recognize it. I knew it belonged to you too." Sandra stared at her in disbelief. "You saved it," Elena nodded. "But there's more. I think Mark still has something. A second letter." "A second letter?" "Yes," Elena said. "Keanu wrote you another one. Not the note you found. A different one. He wrote it after the Lake House premiere. He gave it to someone to deliver. But it never reached you." Sandra froze. "How do you know?" "Because I found an email chain between him and Mark," Elena replied, pulling out her phone. "He asked Mark to deliver the letter personally to your manager. Mark replied saying he would, but he never did." Sandra's pulse raced. "So he kept it all these years?" "Maybe," Elena said. "But I found out he's been working in Toronto. He runs an auction house now. If that letter still exists, it's probably there." That evening, Sandra sat in her hotel room again, staring out at the rain. Her thoughts were scattered, torn between anger, sadness, and curiosity. Keanu had written another letter, a letter she never saw. What could it have said? What could have been so important that he trusted someone else to deliver it? She took a deep breath and dialed Keanu's number. He answered on the second ring. "Hey," he said softly. "How are you holding up?" "There's something I need to tell you," she said. Her voice was steady but low. "It's about the letters." "There's another one." There was silence on the line. Then Keanu said quietly, "You found out." "You knew." "I didn't want to bring it up," he said. "It was a long time ago. I didn't think it mattered anymore." "It matters," she whispered. "Especially now," he sighed softly. "Yes, I wrote it. After the Lake House premiere, I tried to tell you everything I couldn't say in person. But when I didn't hear back, I thought maybe it wasn't meant to be." "You trusted the wrong person," she said. "I know," he replied. "And maybe I was scared too. Scared of saying too much or saying it too late." She closed her eyes, hearing the honesty in his voice. "Do you remember what you wrote?" He hesitated. "Not word for word, but I remember the last line." "What was it?" He paused. "If time separates us again, I hope kindness finds a way to bring us back." Her eyes filled with tears. "And it did," she whispered. "Maybe it's not too late," he said. "Maybe it's not," she replied softly. A few days later, Sandra and Keanu quietly flew to Toronto. No one knew except Elena, who had managed to find the address of Mark Henderson's auction office. They planned to confront him, not for revenge but for the truth. When they arrived, the building was old but elegant, filled with vintage film posters and collectible props. An assistant led them to Mark's office. He was older now, with graying hair and sharp eyes. When he saw them, his expression froze. "Keanu Reeves, Sandra Bullock," he said slowly. "This is unexpected." Keanu stayed calm. "We're not here to cause trouble," he said. "We just want something that belongs to us." Mark leaned back in his chair, feigning confusion. And what might that be? A letter, Sandra said. The one you took, he smiled slightly. I don't know what you're talking about. Elena, who stood behind them, stepped forward and placed her phone on the desk. The screen displayed the old email exchange, proof of what he had done. Mark's smile faded. He glanced at the screen, then at them. You have no idea what you're dealing with, he said. That letter was worth more than you think. So you sold it? Keanu asked quietly. Mark hesitated, then sighed. Not exactly. I kept it. I thought maybe one day it would mean something again. He opened a drawer and pulled out a small sealed envelope. It was aged, but the handwriting was clear. For Sandra. For a moment, no one spoke. Sandra stepped forward slowly, her eyes fixed on the envelope. She reached out, but Mark hesitated. Why now? He asked. Why come after all this time? Keanu's answer was simple. Because unfinished stories deserve endings. Mark said nothing as he handed it over. Sandra held the letter gently, as if afraid it might crumble. She didn't open it yet. Instead, she looked at Keanu. I want to read it somewhere quiet, she said softly. He nodded. I know the place. They left the building and drove to a quiet lakeside outside the city. The same kind of lake that had once defined their story, in fiction and in life. The wind was cold, but neither of them cared. Sandra sat on a bench while Keanu stood beside her. She carefully unsealed the envelope and unfolded the letter. The paper trembled slightly in her hands. The ink had faded, but the words were still legible. Dear Sandra, I never believed in destiny until I met you. Maybe we were meant to cross paths, not to start something, but to remind each other that good people still exist. You taught me that silence can be loud when it's filled with understanding. I don't know what life will bring or if our paths will meet again, but I want you to know. You made me believe in kindness again. And if time separates us, I hope kindness finds a way to bring us back. Sandra's tears fell softly on the paper. Keanu watched quietly, his expression unreadable, but his eyes heavy with emotion. You wrote this when? She asked softly. Right after the premiere, he said. I was going through a dark time. I didn't think I'd ever say those words out loud. She folded the letter gently and looked at him. Maybe you just did. They stood together in silence as the wind rippled across the lake. For the first time in years, there were no cameras, no scripts, no distance. Only truth. The truth. Inside the original letter. That night, the sky over Toronto was quiet and dark, heavy with the kind of silence that always follows deep emotion. Sandra sat by her hotel window again, the letter still in her hands. The paper carried a faint scent of old ink and time, fragile, like a whisper from the past. She had read it more than 10 times since the lake. Every word felt honest, simple, full of warmth. And yet, something in her heart said there was still more left unsaid. Then her phone buzzed again. It was Elena. Her voice trembled. Sandra, you need to come right now. There's something you should see. What is it? Sandra asked, already reaching for her coat. It's about the letter, Elena said. Someone just contacted me. He says he has the original one, and it's not the same as the one you read. 20 minutes later, Sandra's car pulled up to an old art gallery on the edge of downtown. Keanu was already there, leaning against the wall, hands in his pockets, face calm but alert. When she stepped out, he looked at her, his eyes quietly asking the same question she had been wondering all the way there. What now? Inside, the air smelled of old wood and paint. Dim lights hung above, illuminating scattered paintings and boxes. Elena stood near the back, holding her phone and talking to a man who looked nervous. He was middle-aged, dressed simply, his hands shaking slightly as he held a sealed plastic case. This is Mr. Hall, Elena said softly. He used to work with Mark Henderson. He found something after Mark left the company. The man nodded. I don't want any trouble, he said. But when I heard you were looking for the missing letters, I thought, maybe it's time you had this. He handed the plastic case to Keanu. Inside was a single envelope, yellowed with age. It looked similar to the one they had recovered. Same handwriting, same seal, but this one had a faint red mark on the back. "Where did you find this?" Keanu asked. "In a storage box," Mr. Hall said quietly. "Mark had duplicates made to hide the real one. I think he was planning to sell the original later. This one, it's untouched." Keanu and Sandra exchanged a look. He carefully opened the case and pulled out the letter. The paper was softer, the ink darker. He began to read. "Dear Sandra, I hope this finds you someday. Maybe when time has healed what it needs to heal. You once said that movies can bring people together even when they're apart. I used to think that was just a line for the cameras, but now I know it's true, because when I see your films, I see not just acting. I see the person you are, the person who listens when others rush, who forgives even when hurt. That kind of grace is rare. I wish I had told you something that day, something I've carried for years. You saved me once and you didn't even know it." Keanu stopped reading for a moment. The room went completely silent. Sandra's eyes widened. "Saved you," she whispered. He took a deep breath and continued. "It was during the shoot for Speed. Everyone remembers the stunts, the action, the chaos. But I remember the night I almost quit. I was tired, angry, lost in my own head. You noticed before anyone else did. You brought me tea, sat beside me, and said, 'You don't have to pretend to be strong all the time.' I never forgot that. That one sentence stopped me from walking away. Not from the film, but from life itself. I was going through more than anyone knew. And your kindness reminded me that I still mattered. I never said thank you. This letter is my way of doing that." By the time he finished, his hands were trembling slightly. He placed the letter on the table and looked away. Sandra's eyes filled with tears. She tried to speak, but her voice broke. "You never told me," she whispered. He shook his head. "I couldn't. Back then, I didn't know how to talk about pain. I just worked through it." She stepped closer, her hand trembling as she touched the edge of the letter. "All these years, I thought you were the strong one, the one helping everyone else." He smiled faintly. "We were helping each other. We just didn't realize it." Elena looked down, quietly wiping her eyes. Even Mr. Hall, standing awkwardly near the door, seemed moved. "So this is the real letter," Sandra said softly. "Yes," Keanu said. "And maybe this is the real ending." She shook her head. "No, this isn't the end. This is the beginning of understanding what we both missed." They left the gallery and walked along the empty street. Streetlights glowed softly against the wet pavement. Sandra walked a few steps ahead, lost in thought. "You never wanted people to know this, did you?" she asked quietly. "No," he said. "Some things are meant to stay between souls, not screens." She smiled faintly. "That's why people respect you, Keanu. You don't chase attention. It follows you because of your heart." He chuckled softly. "Attention fades. Truth stays." She stopped walking. "And what's the truth now?" He looked at her for a long moment before replying. "The truth is, you reminded me what kindness looks like. Maybe that's what unfinished stories are really about. Not love or regret, but gratitude that lasts forever." She nodded, her eyes reflecting the soft city light. "Then maybe it's time the world knows the real reason we kept crossing paths." He frowned slightly. "You want to tell them?" "Not everything," she said. "Just enough to remind people that kindness can change lives, that not every story is about fame or love. Some are about quiet humanity." Keanu thought for a moment. Then he smiled. "If we do this, we do it right. No headlines, no gossip, just truth." "Agreed," she said. The next day, Elena arranged a small interview setup in the same park where they had read the letter earlier. There were no journalists, no crowds, just a single camera, a wooden bench, and two friends sitting side by side telling their story. It wasn't about romance. It wasn't about fame. It was about how two people helped each other survive a world that often forgot to be kind. Sandra spoke first, her voice calm but filled with emotion. Sometimes we meet people who remind us that gentleness isn't weakness. Keanu was one of those people for me. Keanu followed softly. And sometimes someone says one small thing that changes everything, even if they never realize it. Sandra did that for me. Their words were simple, but the silence between them said everything. When the camera stopped recording, Sandra turned to Keanu. "How do you feel?" He smiled faintly. "Lighter." "Me too," she whispered. Elena quietly packed the camera and smiled. "You have no idea how many people will need to hear this." "Maybe," Keanu said. "But even if one person feels less alone after watching it, that's enough." As they walked away, the first rays of morning sunlight broke through the gray clouds. The world was waking up, unaware that something beautiful had just been captured, something more powerful than any film. But before the video could even be shared, an unexpected message arrived on Elena's phone. Her eyes widened. "Oh my God," she whispered. Sandra turned. "What is it?" Elena looked up, pale but trembling with disbelief. "Someone just uploaded a video. It's a behind-the-scenes clip from Speed." "Keanu, it's the night you mentioned in the letter. Someone filmed it." Keanu froze. "That's impossible." Elena shook her head. "It's real, and it's going viral." When the world saw the truth, the next morning everything changed. Keanu woke to the sound of his phone ringing again and again. He glanced at the screen, dozens of missed calls, hundreds of messages. His inbox was flooded with notifications. Headlines were already spreading across the world. Rare footage from Speed. Set goes viral, shows Keanu Reeves comforting a co-star in emotional moment. The internet is in tears after seeing young Keanu and Sandra's unseen kindness behind the scenes. Clip reveals the moment that changed Keanu Reeves forever. He sat up confused, his heart beating faster. He opened one of the links. The video was everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, news feeds. It showed him on that night decades ago, sitting quietly beside Sandra, both of them unaware of the camera. The lighting was dim, the air tense. The crew had wrapped for the day, and the exhaustion showed on everyone's faces. Young Keanu sat apart, his head bowed, hands clasped together. Sandra entered the frame quietly, carrying 2 paper cups of tea. She sat beside him, no words at first, just silence, gentle and real. Then she spoke, her voice soft. "You don't have to pretend to be strong all the time." He looked up, and for a brief second his eyes glistened, the same moment described in his lost letter. The video ended right there. No drama, no acting. Just 2 people being human in a world that often forgot how. Within hours, millions of people were sharing the clip. Comments flooded every platform. "This is what kindness looks like. No fake tears. No fame. Just 2 good people caring. I didn't know a single sentence could save someone's life." The internet had found something rare: sincerity. Sandra saw the clip later that morning. She was sitting at the hotel desk, half-dressed for an interview she had no intention of attending. Her phone buzzed nonstop. She finally pressed play. As she watched her younger self hand Keanu that cup of tea, tears filled her eyes. The memory came back so clearly. The exhaustion, the noise, the confusion. She remembered that moment wasn't about comfort or fame. It was just about noticing someone who needed quiet. She whispered to herself, "I can't believe someone filmed that." Then the door knocked. It was Elena holding her tablet. "It's everywhere," she said breathlessly. "People are calling it the moment of kindness. News outlets are replaying it, fans are crying, and charities are tagging both of you. You're trending in over 20 countries." Sandra smiled faintly, wiping her eyes. "Maybe that's not a bad thing," she said softly. "Maybe people needed to remember what kindness looks like." Across town, Keanu sat on a park bench, watching the video on his phone with quiet disbelief. Strangers were walking past, some whispering when they recognized him, others just smiling softly as they passed. His friend and manager, Paul, called him. "Man, you're everywhere," Paul said. "People are calling you the gentle revolution. You just broke the internet without even trying." Keanu chuckled softly. "I didn't do anything. It was just a conversation." "Yeah, but that's the thing," Paul said. "You didn't do anything. You were. That's what people love." Keanu smiled faintly. "I just hope it reminds people to slow down, to listen." He hung up and put his phone down. For a few quiet minutes, he just watched the lake. Children were feeding ducks nearby. A couple was walking hand in hand, and for the first time in years, he felt peace. But that peace didn't last long. His phone buzzed again. This time, a message from an unknown sender. "Mr. Reeves, I was there that night. I think you should know the full story. Please meet me before the world gets it wrong. No name, no details, only a location, the same old studio where they had filmed Speed." That evening, Keanu and Sandra met there quietly. The place looked almost the same. Though the colors had faded, the posters peeled, and dust covered the floors. It felt like stepping back into time. "Who sent the message?" Sandra asked softly. "I don't know," Keanu said. "But whoever it is, they know something." They walked down the hallway, their footsteps echoing. The air was thick with memories. At the end of the corridor, a small light flickered in the control room. Inside stood a man in his late 50s, thin with tired eyes. "I thought you'd never come," he said. Keanu frowned slightly. "Do I know you?" The man nodded. "You might not remember me. I was one of the assistant cameramen. My name's Ben." Sandra stepped closer. "You filmed the clip?" He nodded slowly. "Yes. It wasn't planned." That night, the director asked us to check lighting for an extra scene. But when we came back, the stage was empty, except for you two. I saw how tired you looked, how quiet it was, and I just let the camera roll. It felt like something real. Keanu looked at him carefully. "Why didn't you show it before?" Ben sighed. "Because it wasn't mine to share. It was private. I kept it safe all these years. But recently, someone hacked into an old archive where I'd stored backup footage. I didn't leak it." "I swear." "Then who did?" Sandra asked. Ben hesitated. "A man named Mark Henderson." Keanu's expression changed. "Him again?" "Yes," Ben said. "He found the footage and sold it. But before he did, he edited something out." "What do you mean?" Ben turned to his computer, pulled up a folder, and clicked a file. The screen flickered, showing the same familiar moment. Sandra handing Keanu tea. But this time, the video didn't end there. It continued, after she said, "You don't have to pretend to be strong all the time." Keanu looked down for a few seconds, then whispered something barely audible. Ben turned up the volume. Keanu's younger voice filled the room softly. "Thank you for seeing me." Then Sandra's younger self reached over, gently touching his hand. "Everyone deserves to be seen." And Keanu, with a faint, shaky smile, whispered, "I hope one day people see you the same way." The screen went black. Neither of them spoke. After a moment, Sandra turned to Keanu. "You said that?" He nodded slowly. "I didn't remember. Maybe I didn't think it mattered then." "It mattered," she said softly. "It always did." Ben looked down. "I wanted you both to know the world saw the edited version, but I wanted you to see the real one." Sandra placed a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you for keeping it safe." He smiled faintly. "Some things are too human to be deleted." As they walked out of the studio, the night air felt colder, heavier with emotion. Sandra stopped under a flickering streetlight. "The world finally saw your pain," she said softly. Keanu shook his head. "No, they saw kindness, yours." "Ours," she corrected gently. For a long moment, they just stood there. No cameras, no lights, no scripts, just two souls who had found their truth. "So what happens now?" she asked quietly. He smiled faintly. "Maybe nothing. Maybe the world just needed a reminder. Maybe this was never about us at all." But he was wrong. The world wasn't done yet, because by morning, the full version of the clip, the one Ben showed them, would somehow be leaked too. And this time, It wouldn't just touch hearts. It would start a global movement. Everyone deserves to be seen by sunrise. The world had changed again. Screens all over the globe were glowing with one clip, the unedited version of that quiet, forgotten moment from years ago. No background music, no flashy editing, just two people in a dim studio sharing a moment of honesty. It spread faster than anyone could track. Fans shared it. Journalists analyzed it. Teachers played it in classrooms. Charities quoted it. And soon, people everywhere began writing the same words in captions, drawings, signs, and even on walls. Everyone deserves to be seen. The phrase became more than a trend. It became a message, one that people felt deep in their hearts. By mid-morning, Sandra's phone wouldn't stop ringing. But she didn't care about interviews or talk shows. She sat quietly at her kitchen table, scrolling through messages from strangers all around the world. A young teacher from Brazil wrote, "I showed the clip to my students. We all cried. Now they write kind notes to each other every Friday." A soldier from Poland wrote, "After years of hiding my feelings, I finally spoke to my family. I realized I deserved to be seen too." A child in India had drawn a picture, two stick figures holding teacups, and had written, "Thank you for showing us how to care." Sandra covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. "They understood," she whispered. Her assistant Lucy smiled softly. "They didn't just understand," she said. "They felt it." Across the ocean, Keanu was walking through a park in Los Angeles, wearing his usual black jacket and quiet smile. People recognized him everywhere now, but no one rushed for selfies. Instead, they simply nodded, a look of gratitude, not fandom. A young woman approached him shyly, holding her phone. "Sir," she said softly, "my dad and I hadn't spoken in years. Last night we watched your video together. It helped us talk again." Keanu smiled gently. "That makes me happy." "Thank you," she said, eyes bright with emotion. He nodded politely and walked on. His heart was full, but his mind was calm. Fame had never been his goal. Connection was? He sat on a park bench and watched the city breathe. For once, he wasn't acting or hiding. He was just there, present, quiet, alive. A little boy ran up to him holding a drawing. "You're the tea guy," the boy said proudly. Keanu laughed softly. "The tea guy?" "Yeah," the boy said. "My teacher showed us the video. She said you helped your friend by being nice. I told my friend I'd be his tea guy, too." Keanu smiled, his eyes glistening. "That's a good thing to be. You want to see my drawing?" the boy asked, handing him a folded paper. It showed two people sitting on a bench with steam rising from cups. Underneath it were the words written in messy handwriting. "Everyone deserves to be seen." Keanu carefully folded the paper again and placed it in his pocket. "Thank you," he said softly. The boy grinned and ran off. Later that week, Sandra and Keanu agreed to meet again. This time, not for a film, not for a camera, but to quietly visit a community center that had started something inspired by their story. When they arrived, they saw dozens of children, volunteers, and teachers gathered around tables, each writing small letters labeled to someone who needs to feel seen. A woman approached them with tears in her eyes. "You two started this," she said. "People are leaving letters in hospitals, shelters, and schools. Strangers are writing to strangers, just to remind them they matter." Sandra looked around, speechless. All of this came from one small moment?" The woman nodded. "One small act of kindness started 1,000 more." Keanu smiled softly. "That's how it's supposed to be." As the day ended, they stepped outside into the golden sunset. The air was warm and full of laughter from the children behind them. Sandra turned to Keanu, her voice quiet. "Did you ever think the world would react like this?" He shook his head. "No, I thought it was just between us. But maybe the world needed to see what silence and kindness can look like." "And maybe," she said, "this was how our unfinished story was meant to end. Not with words, but with something that healed others." He looked at her gently. "You know, Sandra, you were right back then. About what? Movies can bring people together, even when they're apart," she smiled. "And kindness can keep them together." They stood there for a while, watching the sunlight fade into evening. For the first time in years, both of them felt a quiet completion. Not because the world finally understood them, but because they finally understood themselves. Months later, the small movement born from their story became something much bigger. Schools called it the Scene Project. Social campaigns used the hashtag Everyone Deserves to Be Seen. Millions shared their stories of loneliness, kindness, and small gestures that changed their days. But Keanu and Sandra never took credit. They stayed quiet, often watching from the sidelines, smiling at what people were creating. Once, during a charity event, a reporter asked them, "Do you think this story will fade with time?" Keanu smiled softly. "Maybe the trend will, but kindness never fades. It just waits to be remembered again." And Sandra added, "The real story was never about us. It was about what we all carry inside. The power to see someone before they disappear into silence." A year later, Keanu visited that same park again, the one where the boy had shown him the drawing. Near the bench stood a small bronze plaque. It read, "Inspired by a simple act of kindness filmed long ago, but remembered forever, everyone deserves to be seen." He sat down quietly, smiling to himself. A breeze moved through the trees, carrying the laughter of children from afar. After a few minutes, his phone buzzed. A message from Sandra. "Saw the plaque today? Proud of what we started. Thank you for finishing the story." He typed back simply, "Some stories don't end. They just keep helping people find their light." He put his phone away, took a deep breath, and watched the sunset paint the sky gold. Somewhere deep inside, he felt peace, the kind that only comes from knowing that kindness, once shared, never truly dies. And as the world carried their story forward, through voices, art, letters, and small daily acts, one truth remained clear and timeless: everyone deserves to be seen.